Hello everyone, and welcome back to an episode of Persona 4 Arena. In the last episode, we finished up Aigis' story, and in this episode we are going to go to Mitsuru's story. Again, just like Aigis and some of the others, I haven't seen Mitsuru's yet, so this will be pretty interesting because, well, with how the last one, with how Aigis and Naoto's went, um, with their whole route and everything, those were very interesting. I'm just really ready to see how this goes from Mitsuru's perspective. So, without any more of my rambling, let's begin.
I wish you good luck.
Late November in the year 2012. Not 2012, 2010. Gosh dang it, Persona 4's date is stuck in my head. Help. The darkness fell without warning. At the same time, the previously busy examination room fell so silent that the man's ears hurt.
Hey, what happened?
He called toward the back of the room, but no answer came. After working for public safety for over a decade, he thought little could face him anymore, but this was uncomfortably alien. It was no ordinary blackout. If it were, the faint light from machines running on battery power, such as cell phones, would remain. But the silence disturbed him even more. He hadn't heard so much as a single cry. When he looked around, he saw one spot in the darkness where something was giving off an eerie glow as if painted in incandescent pigments. Once his eyes began to adjust to the darkness, he was faintly able to make out the area around the light. The shining spot was revealed as a small, strangely decorated box that the man had only just delivered to the forensics unit.
Forensics team! What the hell is...
He called out, still squinting at the shadow of a person he could see at the window before him. But as the shape resolved, he saw that it was not a person's shadow at all. He had no words to describe it. At first glance, it seemed to be a coffin. Indeed, that is what it was shaped like. But he had never seen a coffin standing upright, tall as an adult, shining like a dark crystal. Yet that was clearly what the crystalline mass was, squatting in the spot where his window clerk normally stood. And upon closer examination, it wasn't the only one. At desks in front of the evidence shelf, next to the reference computer, the objects towards everywhere, as if they had taken the place of humans.
What are these?
A chill ran down the man's spine. They're people, was a thought that instinctively came to mind. Was this the reason he couldn't hear anyone else's voice? Was it because everyone but him was?
What's going on?
Once the fear had set in, it wasn't easy to shake off. His familiar office was starting to look like a grotesque netherworld. He felt quite sure that he had to get out. Quickly, he turned and grabbed the knob to the door through which he had just entered. But
What the...
it didn't budge. It wasn't that the door was locked, preventing the knob from turning the latch. The knob was completely frozen in place.
Is anyone here? Hey! Let me out!
The man slammed his fist against the door, yelling in desperation. But the sensation he felt when his fist impacted the surface wasn't that of hitting a door. It felt completely at odds with what he saw, as if a picture of a door had been drawn onto a solid wall. It was then that the man noticed that another light, similar in color to the emanating from the box, could be seen on part of his hand as he swung it forward. It was a ring. And suddenly he remembered. When he brought in the small box, he found several bizarre ring-shaped objects within it. While heading it over to the forensics, he suspected that they might be rings. To check the theory, he put one on. And now that ring was emanating the same eerie light as the box. Though he still had no idea what was going on, it was immediately apparent that it was directly related to the current situation. The man grabbed the ring with sweat-slicked fingers and tugged, ready to pull off his own finger if necessary. But just at that moment,
Take that off right now.
What?
the man can't help but gasp. He looked around, but could sense no one inside the room with him. Where had the voice come from?
I'll be there to rescue you shortly. Calm yourself and wait there.
When the man calmed himself, he realized that it wasn't a voice. The sensation was indescribable, but was distinctly unlike hearing with one's
Who's
ears.
there?
Oh, pardon me. This is Mitsuru Kirijo. We met earlier.
I swear, he thinks that voice is coming from the ring. Kirijo. He did not know a Kirijo. It was she who brought the strange small box. And that wasn't all he knew. The Kirijos were a wicked family who used their fortune and influence as a shield, continuing to frustrate the police. Despite that, the man couldn't help but feel relief wash over him. Perhaps he might survive this after all.
Well, I appreciate the help. Just hurry.
After getting the muttered words out, he sank to the floor, the door at his back. Mitsuru Kirijo, if he recalled correctly, she was the eldest daughter of the Kirijo group's founding family. He noted that her voice had been far calmer than his, despite the situation they were both in. He sensed a measure of trustworthiness from her, and to think it had been merely an hour ago that he was asking himself why such a young girl had been chosen as the head of the Kirijo group at all. The digital clock on the corner of the desk quietly announced the arrival of 10 in the morning. Normally, most of the staff would be out by now, but the entire police department was in turmoil today. It was only to be expected with a key figure from the Kirijo group visiting on unusual business.
Kirijo, huh?
The Kirijo group was a major trading firm, synonymous with Japan. They had links to all areas of business. Not a day could go by in the city without hearing their name. The clock that had struck 10 bore the long of Kirijo Electronics, and KJ was the carrier for the cell phone provided for every member of the force. A few days ago, the same Kirijo group had made a seemingly insane proposal. The document was hundreds of pages, but a brief summary would read, "We wish to collaborate with the police on an unofficial department for eliminating monsters."
Well, it does happen from time to time. Famous businessmen end up advocating cultish nonsense in pursuit of their ambitions.
Upon consideration, it was decided that the Kirijo group should be invited to give their pitch. Of course, there was no intention of spending tax money on the outlandish proposal. The police's interest in humoring the Kirijo group lay elsewhere. The Kirijo group had offered an incentive whereby if the police agreed to the meeting, they would provide a detailed list of the ergonomics research lab's artifacts as well as actual samples. It was this that drove the officials' decision. For there had been dark rumors bandied about the Kirijo group over the last 10 years. While still a family-run business, some said that old man Koetsu Kirijo had delved into paranormal research and was performing inhumane experiments. The police collected enough evidence to test the rumor, and had prepared many times to force an investigation. But every time, the investigation came to nothing due to the group exerting hidden pressure, frustrating those working on the case to no end. The investigation's prime target was the infamous Ergo Research, the Kirijo Ergonomics Research Lab. Exposing the Kirijo group's dark side had been a dream of public safeties for 10 years now. And now Kirijo seemed willing to hand over the Ergo Research's tightly guarded secrets on a silver platter. No one knew the reason for this sudden about-face, but neither did anyone think of turning them down. They agreed to the summit not to hear out whatever proposal Kirijo was offering, but as a stepping stone towards unearthing their past crimes. Time passed and the agreed-upon time in the afternoon came. The man was tasked with watching over and bringing in the artifacts from the Kirijo group. Though he would not speak with the guest, the police's plan afforded him a major responsibility that gave him something like a leading role. It wasn't long before the Kirijo car arrived in the back on the underground Porte Coche. Gosh, I cannot pronounce that. Anyway, the staff there to receive the guest only shrugged at the long black limousine that would have turned heads on the main roads. One of the youngest recruits looked towards the man and asked a question.
Chief, what's with that car?
But that was the least of the surprises in store. When the Kirijo group representative stepped out of the limousine, she was shown to be a beautiful young woman, no older than a university student. Not only that, but she had attendants dressed in what could only be described as maid uniforms. All of them were young women roughly her age. The scene mesmerized the various dignitaries presented to greet her.
Thank you very much for this opportunity. I am Mitsuru Kirijo, representing the Kirijo group. It's nice to meet you.
Her brisk greeting radiated poise. From there, she shook hands with the assembled dignitaries in a manner that showed she was no stranger to social gatherings.
She's the company rep? Really?
The young recruit, who was sneaking looks out of the corner of his eye, muttered in spite of himself.
The proposal said the rep who's coming today would be the leader of this new unit, but I thought it was supposed to be some hardcore armed response team, and she's leading it? Well, I guess it's better than some meathead.
Shut up and hold your position.
But in truth, the man felt the same way. Certainly, this monster extermination unit would never be incorporated, but even if it were, he was sure this wisp of a girl could never do such work. Eventually, the dignitaries entered the agency along with Miss Kirijo. All of them wore lopsided smiles due to the young beauty's unexpected appearance, but that would do for now. The dignitaries were only there to receive her. Their true objective was loaded in the truck parked behind the limousine. The documents and artifacts of Ergo research.
All right, start bringing them in.
Roger, sir.
At the man's signal, his trained subordinates surrounded the Kirijo truck. They formed a line, smoothly passing boxes from man to man into the building. The articles were of various size, and even a few that came in oversized metallic containers for aerial transport. The Kirijo group had warned them not to handle these things carelessly until explanations were forthcoming. But in truth, the department were already prepared to begin a forensic investigation of the objects, or even send them to the lab.
Sure it's okay for us to open these? The instructions said not to.
It won't be a real investigation if we let them hamstring our procedures. Besides, I can't think of anything they could send us that we couldn't handle. Unless there's real monsters inside these things.
The oracles were brought in silence. The operation only lasted about 15 minutes. The man himself received the last item in the seas of a jewelry box and checked the truck to make sure nothing went overlooked before closing it up. That done, he turned and walked quickly towards the forensics room. Try though he might to maintain his composure, he couldn't contain this excitement he felt. For 10 years, the darkness of the Kirijo group had been a frustrating legend, like mist between the department's fingers. Their chance to investigate and expose them was here at last. If even the slightest evidence matched the DNA of those who had gone missing, or the victims of the unsolved cases, victory would be theirs. The man tried to tamp down his exhilaration and took another look at the small box he held. There was no upper lid on the box. A pedestal-like protrusion at its center held a number of small circular trinkets. Their usage was completely unknown. What kind of research produced these? Just as the man was about to hand the box to the window clerk, he saw a wedding ring. The clerk's finger, and came to realization.
Are these rings?
We're not sure yet.
The man put on some protective latex gloves and tried one of them on. After looking at it from every angle, its color and shape seemed to be nothing but ordinary. If it was meant to be jewelry, it wasn't very attractive. The man couldn't picture scientists in lab coats slaving away in a lab to create rings like these. The moment that unlikely possibility came to mind, the man felt somewhat embarrassed by his ignorance of fashion and accessories. But as soon as he reached for the small box to put the ring back inside, darkness suddenly fell, and nothing more.
Please step away from the door.
The voice echoing in the man's mind brought him back to reality. He took a few steps away from the door as directed and stood ready. Step away from the door. The more he thought about it, the stranger the order seemed. How did she know he was close to the door when she wasn't even in the room? Is this the power persona? Suddenly, a chill filled the— I knew she was gonna freeze it! In mere seconds, the entire door was coated in white.
Where'd this ice come from?
It had frosted over. The man couldn't believe his eyes, but the evidence was there in front of him. He could then hear a slight knocking sound, followed by a crack forming in the center. The door buckled under its own weight and crumbled with a sound that was like building blocks being pushed over. Standing just past it was the Kirijo woman. She walked over to the man with exquisite nonchalance. At her side was one of the maids she
Are
brought.
you all right?
Yeah.
We did give you fair warning, but it seems to have gone unheeded.
The man looked towards the ring shining on his finger.
This happened because we touched that box? What is this thing?
That ring gives its bearer an unstable form of pseudo-potential and allows anyone to experience the Dark Hour.
The Dark Hour?
Wait, crud. This explains one plot point in Persona 3 that I've had a question about. Huh, what do you know?
The box itself seems to be a failed recreation of the Dark Hour. The effect radius is small, and it malfunctions when improperly handled.
But yeah, this makes sense why Mitsuru's father could still be conscious while in the Dark Hour. And it also explains how the chairman in Persona 3 could also have still remained conscious, well, still remain in his form during the Dark Hour as well. Huh. I can't believe they actually answered that. Well, not really, because it never claimed that they had those, but it somewhat explains that. Forget my little thing. The Dark Hour. You remember that phrase coming up in the documents the Kirijo group had sent? If he recalled correctly, it was defined as a hidden time, unable to be experienced by normal people, where everything stood still. According to the documents, it seems to have occurred every night at midnight for about 10 years until spring 2011, as if forcing its way into normal time. Wait, didn't it say 2012? Not 2012. 2010 at the beginning of this? I guess this is meant to be 2012. I'm not sure. Until now, it seemed like pure fantasy. But could this silent darkness be the very same thing?
So you're saying those stories in that document, that occult-sounding stuff was actually for real?
At that moment, he knew. He messed up. I'm kidding. Gosh. A voice suddenly echoed from beyond the hallway past the broken door.
Who's there?
The man reflexively called out an alarm, realizing that the fear had not yet died down. What emerged from the darkness was the young recruit who had greeted the guests earlier and had been helping with bringing in the artifacts. The young man was staggering as if severely drunk.
Hey, are you alright?
The man began to rush to his side, but the Kirijo woman silently stopped him. She stood between the two as if protecting the man.
He's my...
Before he could finish, a surprising change overtook the recruit. And then a man flipping died. The recruit fell to the ground with an agonized scream. A black tar-like substance began flowing from his every orifice. The ooze spread unnaturally across the ground and poured into a glob. It rose up, like a beast raising its head, and what looked like claws began to form. Its appearance showed clear signs that it possessed some malevolent will. Oh gosh. The man thought again about the Kirijo group's initial proposal. We wish to collaborate with the police on an unofficial department for eliminating monsters! Without a doubt, this was what they referred to. That name that came up again and again was...
This is a shadow.
That it is. It's a monster that dwells in every person's heart. They usually can't manifest themselves this way, but it's quite common to see it happen during the Dark Hour.
So the research to make this happen artificially. That's what Kirijo has been experimenting with.
That did seem to be the extent of it.
At the start. I'm sorry for skipping that, my bad. The man couldn't prevent himself from shuddering to imagine the implications of her statement. With a second roar, the half-liquefied shadow suddenly took the form of some fell beast. But where the shadow, or where the face should have been, was nothing but a mask, giving it a bizarre appearance of two creatures stitched together. The young woman, for her part, seemed not in the least perturbed.
Kikuno,
Or
my
perturbed.
things, please.
The maid stopped to reach something. The man wasn't sure where she had been carrying it, but she placed the sword in her master's hand. The blade was specially shaped, similar in design to a fencing saber.
Going to fight it?
Stay back. This will all be over soon.
At that moment, as if understanding their conversation, the shadow squared itself and leapt towards the young woman. Its speed matched its beastly appearance. In the darkness of the room, the man found it difficult simply keeping his eye on it. The young woman did not move. Her sword remained lowered in the face of the shadow's advance. Of course, thought the man, an amateur like her could never react in time. However,
Artemisia!
at a word from the young woman, some unseen force slammed the shadow against the wall. The man momentarily doubted his own eyes, for it hadn't been the woman who repelled the monster, but a silhouette that suddenly appeared behind her. It looked as though the being enveloped in sublime white, contrasting the shadow's dark glow, was a woman wearing a majestic dress. The silhouette held up a hand toward the crouching shadow. Once again, the man felt freezing air fill the room. And then stinking Artemisia just gosh dang froze the gosh dang shadow. Only then did the young woman swing the sword in her hand for the first time. A white gleam arced through the air. Upon impact, the frozen enemy shattered like it had been crystallized sugar rather than ice. The victory was so one-sided that the man hesitated to call it a battle.
You all right?
The young woman turned towards the man. The sound of her boots hitting the floor gave him the jarring realization that she hadn't moved a single step during the fray. Seeing that he was at a loss for words, she gave him a gentle smile. It was all too much for the man. He actually felt relieved to be protected by this small woman. One thing was obvious. She had been through countless battles, much like the one he just witnessed.
Your fallen employee's life is in no danger, but he'll be very weak. Make sure he gets to a hospital. Should I make the arrangements?
Also, that guy actually didn't die. Okay, then got it.
No, I should at least handle that. It is a public security matter.
With a nod, the young woman approached the small box and manipulated it in a way he couldn't quite catch. The eerie yellow glow light began to fade. Moments later, the silence and darkness faded. The world had been restored. The man felt his body become suddenly lighter, causing him to breathe a sigh of relief. He hadn't realized until the pressure was gone that the air had been as suffocating as if he had been underwater. There was a stir of movement in the room. The forensics team and assistants looked at the man and young woman perplexed. The man took a quick look around. Fragments of the shattered door were strewn about. A young public security worker was lying unconscious nearby, and their Kirijo guest, who had entered without anyone noticing, held in her hand a drawn sword.
I'd be shocked too if I were them.
It occurred to him that if normal people couldn't sense the dark hour, the sudden change in circumstances may have seemed to them like some magic trick.
Excuse me, but this place is off limits to all unauthorized personnel. Hey, what's going on here?
The forensic staff looked at the man
It's
helplessly.
all right. We had a little emergency.
Oh.
That aside, halt all examination of the relics they brought in. We'll wait for further instructions from the Kirijo group.
Huh? But you said...
If there are any boxes that are closed, don't force them open. Not if you don't want to come face to face with monsters.
Leaving the frowning forensics team behind him, the man quickly went into the hallway with the Kirijo women.
Thank you for your help. And about the conference, I'll join in as well. It's been arranged so nothing you say would get through to the higher-ups.
If the young woman was surprised at what amounted to her confession of betrayal, she didn't show
Are
it.
you saying you will reconsider your plans?
I can't overlook anything as serious as this. I wouldn't be doing my job as public security if I did. But make no mistake, The things I saw today are proof of the sins the Kirijo group has committed. They can't be punished under the law, but now that they're known, atonement will be made in some shape or form.
Indeed. I never intended anything less.
You really put one over on us this time.
Hmm?
Oh, there's no need to be coy. What happened today was no accident, was it? We'd never have believed the reports unless we saw it in person. That's why such a dangerous box had no lid. Am I wrong?
There was no lid. That's not possible. That box was classified as risk level 3. It should have been securely fastened.
The young woman fell silent, then gasped and gave the maid walking silently beside her a look.
Kikuno.
The maid continued without the slightest sign of remorse and left her master behind. Both the man and young woman sighed at once.
Us guys in public security have a reputation for being tough. But it seems like you guys are no slouches yourselves.
The summit that was meant to be functionally refusal took an unexpected turn. Promises were made to continue the talks. 6 months passed. After many opportunities to show the actual samples to the dignitaries were set up, the proposal special unit was established in mostly the form Kirijo requested, the Security Department's Shadow Response Unit. It was the inauguration of the special unit that would in time be nicknamed the Shadow Ops.